it's almost comical. There's a best of list of the 50 best ways that horror writers have gotten rid of cell phones in horror films. You can Google that up. It's pretty funny. Dropping them in toilets, they run over them, the battery's dead. You gotta. So isolation is big, and then
no signal.
Yeah, right. No signal, and then that one's actually especially devious because it gives them hope, and then you can dash it later when the monster steps on it or eats it or whatever. But isolation is huge. I would say include darkness. Darkness is just a fundamental. We can't see in it, and it's scary. And that's about as much as I know about it. The only film I know that broke that mold was The Shining, and Kubrick purposefully set out to make darkness out of light, if that makes sense. He basically wanted to make a film so bright that it was terrifying. And if you watch it again, you'll see that every scene is filled with snow and big white windows, and it's never really dark. Even in the end of the hedge maze, the hedge maze itself is white. And he's one of the only people who's ever succeeded in making a film that's not dark.
That's true.
Yeah, and some of the French
Shining was not one of my favorite films from him.
Me neither.
Oh, I loved it. It's one of my all-time favorites.
I don't know. He took an excellent story by King. I mean, that's one of his better books, and he turned it into a domestic tragedy. And I thought it didn't really have a lot of the horror that was in the book. I agree with you. Missing. But anyway, that's besides the point. We're talking about Drew at the moment. And,
that's okay.
And can you tell us about this company that you just formed, to make film?
Yeah, Daywalt Fear Factory came about in, I think, January, February. And it's essentially the same production team and actors and actresses that I've been using on the previous shorts. And they've all come with me. And, we set out to just make good scares. And we're continuing to do that. We've made 5 films, I think, since then. And one of them, Polydeus, is just gotten picked up and purchased by FearNet, and we're excited about that.
Oh, wow.
It's based on an urban myth. Polydeus is based on the story of Polybius, and it's Polybius. And if you wiki it, it's got a really interesting urban legend attached to it. Apparently, and this is the urban legend, in 1981, in an Oregon suburb outside of Portland, 4 video games were delivered to 4 different arcades. And when the kids played them, they all suffered from seizures, strokes, nightmares, hallucinations. They lost their memory. They blacked out while they were playing. And when formal complaints were later made, the video games couldn't be found. 4 vans came and picked them up the next day and took the games away. And it's one of these great it's really cool. It's a really interesting conspiracy. And I didn't hear about it until maybe a year or 2 ago. And I thought, man, that's fascinating. And it's ripe for horror. So we did a short that involves 2 young guys, gamer guys, who get their hands on the original ROM program for the game, and they've gotten it from Guantanamo Bay. One of their brothers was in the army, and he got a copy of it on a CD-ROM, and they put it in their computer, their home computer, and they play the original game as was intended, and horrible things happen, and they're sort of one of them is transported to another world. It's sort of a Tron meets Hellraiser.
That sounds fantastic.
We were really pleased, and Jeff Farley, who does all of my creature work, he created, I think, something that was completely just twisted and inspired for the creature.
Is that your avatar on Facebook?
Yeah, actually, it is. It is. If you wanted to see it now, just find me on Facebook and check it out. It's like the whole thing was Cthulhian in nature anyway. We wanted to sort of, without saying it, give a little nod to Lovecraft, and there's these creatures in this other world that eat madness. They consume human madness. So that's what they do, is they collect people from this video game into their plane of existence, and then they consume their madness by basically keeping them crazy for the rest of eternity.
You said it was a short film. How long is it?
It's an epic for a short. It's 13 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were a little surprised.
Well, it sounds great. I have one question about, since you have been writing for quite a while and do a good job, and now you have all these shorts that are also really great quality and stuff. Has that allowed you, or have you received any sort of feedback from, anyone higher up the film chain about, you making a feature or something like that?
Yeah, it's opened quite a few doors. Excuse me. It's opened some good doors. Wes Craven picked one of my shorts for the scariest thing on YouTube a couple years ago, and so I ended up getting in touch with Wes Craven's people, and that's a great group of guys. We're all sort of just looking for the right project. Fangoria magazine and Fangoria Online contacted me shortly after they caught wind of the shorts, and we began talking, and I found out from Tom DeFeo, who runs the show over there, that they're looking to re-energize and bring back the Fangoria film brand. They have a video on demand channel that's going to launch, and they have some deals that they want to get where they, with like Blockbuster, where they put films out theatrically in limited release. Mm-hmm. So what they want to do is, relaunch the Fangoria films, but they don't want to do slashers or cheap creature features. He wanted to really try and elevate it to cinema, not to sound snotty, but I think you know what I mean. He didn't want to do trash cinema, and he didn't want to do grindhouse. He wanted it to be, he was looking at films like Wreck or Orphanage or Let the Right One In, and those were his models. And he said he really felt that, doing the world building that I build, I could maybe bring something to it. So we've worked on a feature. We have a feature now that we're going to hopefully get greenlit in the next few months.
Good.
Fantastic.
Okay. A lot of our audience too are aspiring filmmakers themselves. What do you have any suggestions at all or tips for people that are trying to make horror short films on how they can make them, how to make the horror come across better? I know myself that I have had several shorts produced, and although some of them are quite good, I just don't feel that the fear is there. At least the fear that I felt when I wrote it is not there. Do you have any suggestions for filmmakers in that regard?
Oh man, I have a couple of those shorts too. It sucks. You put so much work into it, and I can say that because I actually produced and directed them, and they still sucked. And I was like, oh man, I missed the mark on that one. Sometimes I feel like I got lucky a couple times, but going back to the filmmaking aspect, I want to address that's another great question. I want to address the filmmaking aspect and the horror aspect if I can. The filmmaking aspect, in 2004, I took a break from the business because that's when I was reevaluating what I wanted to do, and because I had so many movies that I was selling movies, and I had a nice career going, but nothing was getting made at the time, and it was really very frustrating. Movies just get tied up and shelved, and you make a living, but it has to get made to end up on IMDb, and it has to get made for you to feel fulfilled as an artist, and blah blah blah. Anyway, I took a little time off, and I decided to go teach film and see what that would do. And I taught essentially what amounts to screenwriting 101 here in Los Angeles at LA Mission College, and it was a community college with not a lot of money, and the kids going there were kids who were hungry for education, and the kids in their film program were hungry to be in film, underprivileged kids who didn't really have much growing up, and they got into school, and they're at this community college hoping to Christ that they can get a decent film education. And I had an amazing experience with them because I think I learned more from them than they ever learned from me. For starters, I quit the business for a year and then ended up getting 3 jobs that same semester. So I told the kids, you're coming with me. So I took them on my productions. But my goal as a teacher there was to show them how to write a short script. And then in Film 101, which is the next class, they would take it and create their short film and produce it. And when I was seeing some of the footage coming back, I was blown away. And this is 2004. And I was like, how did you get that shot? How did you light that car so beautifully? There was one kid who had a scene in a car, and it was lit. It was gorgeous. I mean, it looked like something from Fincher. And I'd learned through the studio system. You need 3 Condors and 200 Ks and, 16 guys to wipe the windshield down and make sure the car is perfect. And, it was a union system that works really well. But I was like, how did you guys do that? And he's like, well, we went to Albertsons, and that's a grocery store here. And I said, what? Mm-hmm. And they said, there's if you go in the light bulb aisle, there's these little lights. You tap them once and they go on. You tap them off, they go off. I'm like, stick-ups? They lit the thing with stick-ups. They lined the dashboard with stick-ups, and they put one under the visor to light from above to give fill.
How clever.
I was like,
yeah, that's great.
And I said, what did you film using? Because it looks like film. It's gorgeous. And they're like, well, it's the new Canon XL2, which at the time was the new hot camera coming off of 28 Days Later, which was the XL1. Then Canon came out with an XL2, which shot 24p. Anyway, I didn't know. I was a screenwriter who didn't have a ton of technical knowledge. And I said, oh my God, you guys got to teach me this stuff. And then and they did. They were awesome. These kids were like little techno wizards. All of them are, I think, working in the film business now because they were early adapters of the digital technology. And I went out and got myself a Canon XL2 like the next week and started shooting. And my recommendation to filmmakers, especially short film and horror makers, is get yourself a camera because they're totally 100% accessible now. I'm using the Canon 7D, which is it's the first high def camera that's halfway decent. And it's literally 1/10 of the cost of the Red camera. So I say get a camera and just start shooting and practice. You know, one of the things that caused my early group to start filming together was we would have D&D nights, you know, Dungeons and Dragons nights, or we'd have poker nights, and it was so hard to just get everybody in the same room that I said I feel like a movie coordinator. And they said, well, why don't you just make a movie? And I was like, you know what? We should, instead of poker night, why don't we have movie night where we, you know, it's like, hey, you guys want to make a movie on Saturday? And he's like, yeah, I'll bring my gels. Okay, I got a sound deal. I bring my camera. This is, you know, after I learned how to use it from the kids. And we started making these shorts. That's how it happened. Now, as far as to address the horror aspect of your question, Pia, I would say that learn to light. Because I had to, learn to light, because lighting can be one of the most elusive things, and it can give you the highest production value of anything you'd ever want. I mean, most of the shorts were shot in my 2-bedroom apartment, or in a friend's garage, or, you know, someone would say, I got a warehouse for the night, you want to make a movie? And bang, we're off shooting at a warehouse because we had it. And somebody like write a horror story about a warehouse. But you know, practice lighting, watch the films you love, freeze frame them, and try and recreate the lighting in your living room. You can do it, you know, especially with the new digital technology and all these low light cameras. You don't need what you needed like when I got out of film school 15 years ago.
Well, one last question from me then. Which one of all your shorts that you have made is your favorite?
Oh, that's not fair. It's like which child's your favorite child?
Well, you always have a favorite child, don't you?
Tia, no.
I actually think it's Polydeus. And unfortunately it's not out yet, but it'll be out, I think, in the next month or two on FearNet. Because it was a real personal best for Jeff Farley, our creature fabricator, and it was a personal best for me. And I was honored to work with Tim Sharp, who was one of the people who was in my first feature. I found Tim when we were casting for Stark Raving Mad, and he played the second lead of that film. And here it is, 8 years later, and we're still friends and still working. And that was a comedy, and this was, you know, a pretty serious drama where he had to go through some harsh things under the hands of these evil things, these evil creatures. And I was really pleased with his performance, and it's one of those things where everything came together. You know, in some of those movies that I totally flubbed, this one was one that it was a perfect storm of good things. So Polydeus is probably my current favorite. But of the ones that are out right now that people can go see, I really like Suicide Girl because it had a little bit of a social commentary. And when I heard about the did you see the one of the there was a kids, there was a mom and a kid who were picking on a girl on MySpace, and they bullied her to the cyberbullying until she killed herself. That was the true story.
Oh.
Yeah, I read about that. Yeah,
it was horrible. And I thought I wanted to do something. I wanted to respond to it some way. So I thought, well, on behalf of the poor girl who committed suicide, I created this little horror short. Not like, it's not exactly altruistic. It was, you know, it is a horror film after all, but, you know, I think that one was another one of my favorites as far as the scares go, because it tends to really get people.
Well, can I ask you one more question? I don't know
Sure.
if I have time. You know, I might get beat up by Cornetto. Yeah. But I read just recently that you go around to visit haunted places. Tell me about that.
Well, it's funny. I have two children. I have a 6-year-old girl and I have a 16-month-old little boy. And last March, right about the time he was, I think, 8 or 9 months old, I had gotten the assignment by Fangoria to write Ringbearer, the feature, the vampire film that I'm doing with them. but I was way behind on the writing schedule because, my son was waking up in the middle of the night, and then when I was up all night, I was exhausted the next day, and, the usual baby stuff. And I told my wife, I said, I'd love to just take 2 nights